There are past moments in history that set off chains of events in ways that can be surprising. That's the case of the past moment we're highlighting in today's episode. Have you heard of World War I? Do you know how it started? Well, that is the past moment you're going to hear about today. On June 28, 1914, the Archduke of Austria, Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie were assassinated by a Serbian national named Gavrilo Princip, who is part of a terrorist organization known as the Black Hand. The assassin was just 19 years old. 1 month later, Austria declared war on Serbia, and World War I began.
Welcome to Check This Out, podcast for kids.
And they're grownups, where we explore people, places, ponderings, and past moments from history that shape the world around us. My name is Amy Contreras.
And I'm Cece.
Today's episode is all about the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, his wife Sophie, and how this moment contributed to the start of World War I.
Check this out.
Did you know that World War I is also referred to by another name?
Want to take a guess?
World War I is also called the Great War. The Great War, or World War I, started in the summer of 1914 after Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were shot. The war lasted 4 years, ending in 1918. More than 20 million soldiers died during World War I, and 21 million more were wounded.
That's a big number.
Well, Cece, World War I had high numbers of dead and injured because it was the first major modern war, so its impacts were massive. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but World War I is remembered for its trench warfare, which led to these numbers.
Oh my goodness!
Trying to talk about past moments from history, like the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, can be tough to do in just a few minutes. But this past moment in history had a big ripple effect that led to World War I.
First things first.
Before we get into this past moment, I want to encourage all of our listeners at Check This Out to put on their critical thinking hats. History has a lot of past moments, but history is rarely simple. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how the Archduke's assassination led to World War I. And this is true, but do you think that was the only reason World War I happened?
No.
Good job, Cece. That's right. There were several factors that ultimately led to the Great War. In the early 20th century, Europe was filled with intense nationalistic feelings, military buildups, and complex alliances.
What do you mean, Mama?
Basically, things in Europe had been really tense for a really long time. There were lots of empires where European countries were controlling other countries or places, and people feeling nationalistic meant they didn't want a foreign country ruling over them anymore. Think of it like if you have a toy, but your big brother or sister come in and claim that toy as their own, even though it's yours, and then they start telling you when and how you can play with that toy. Being nationalistic would be the equivalent of not wanting someone else to tell you how to play with your own toy.
Got it.
And there were lots of alliances across Europe. An alliance is like when a country is friends with another country. And these alliances promised each other that each country would support the other if a war ever broke out between an ally and another country. There were lots of alliances, and some of the alliances kind of conflicted with each other.
More on that later.
Yes, back to the assassination and this past moment in history that we're talking about today. Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Today, this empire no longer exists because after World War I, it split into several countries that still exist today. Do you want to take a guess at what they are?
I got nothing.
Well, today you might recognize that the Austro-Hungarian Empire has turned into the countries of Austria and Hungary.
That makes a lot of sense.
But this empire controlled even more than just those two countries. Other countries that were under the Austro-Hungarian Empire rule became their own independent states after the war too, like Czechoslovakia and parts of Poland, Romania, and Yugoslavia. Before World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had a lot of unhappy people, and there was unrest. Parts of the empire that were especially unhappy wanted independence or union with Serbia, which was another country that was neighbor to the Austro-Hungary Empire.
Huh?
Think of it this way. The country of Serbia was neighbors with the empire that the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was going to be ruler of, and they didn't like how his empire was using its power to influence their country. Some people wanted to leave the empire altogether and go to Serbia, or help Serbia become more independent from the empire.
Good to know.
This part of Europe, where all these countries were located, is also known by another name. Do you want to guess what it is? Is it A, the Slavic region, B, the Austro region, or C, the Balkan region? It's okay if you don't know. That was a hard question. The answer is C, the Balkan region.
How was life there?
The Balkan region was sometimes called the powder keg of Europe because it was ready to blow at any moment because of all the tension between the countries. Before World War I and the Archduke's assassination, it was particularly volatile due to everything we just talked about.
A lot was happening.
Here's what it boils down to. Serbia wanted more independence and unity, which threatened the Austro-Hungarian Empire's hold over its people and policies.
History can be complicated.
You're right. It is. Because we have to understand all this other stuff that was happening to understand why someone who was only 19 years old would assassinate and shoot and kill the Archduke and his wife, Sophie.
I get that.
To recap, here's what we know so far. Number 1, the Archduke and his wife were assassinated by being shot on June 28th in 1914. Number 2, the Archduke and his wife were assassinated by a Serbian national who was only 19 years old. Number 3, there was unrest between the Archduke's empire and Serbia. Number 4, there were lots of things happening across Europe that led to World War I, including complicated alliances and empires, not just the assassination. Now that we've cleared all that up, I think we can get back to the past moments itself. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Here we go.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. This means he was next in line to be king.
Fancy.
He traveled with his wife Sophie to a city called Sarajevo, which was the capital of Bosnia. And at this point in time, it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The trip was an official visit for the Archduke to meet key politicians and review the army. When they arrived, they got into something called a motorcade, which was a car that had an open top. And this car took them through the streets of Sarajevo. They weren't aware of the danger that was waiting for them.
Uh-oh.
The Archduke Franz Ferdinand was being targeted by a group of young Bosnian Serb nationalists who were affiliated or known to be members of the terrorist group or secret society, which was called the Black Hand. These young Bosnian Serb nationalists believed that killing Franz Ferdinand would help unite their territories and ultimately help them stand up to the Austro-Hungarian Empire's control.
Tell me everything!
Although the Archduke was eventually assassinated by being shot, that wasn't the only attempt at taking his life on this trip. Initially, a bomb was thrown at Ferdinand's car by another member of that same group, the Black Hand, but the bomb missed. Later that day, our 19-year-old assassin, Gavrilo Princip, shot and killed the Archduke and his wife Sophie on a nearby street as they were again driving in that motorcade, which was the car with the open top.
How scary.
So you're probably wondering, how did the assassination lead to this multi-year war that we know now as the Great War or World War I? After the assassination, the Archduke's empire held Serbia responsible for supporting that group, the Black Hand, and being in charge or overseeing a terrorist group. The Austro-Hungarian Empire issued an ultimatum. They demanded severe concessions, and they overall wanted to suppress any anti-empire activities.
What happened?
Serbia's response was kind of compliant, kind of on board, but it wasn't enough for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And so the empire declared war on Serbia on July 28th of 1914, kicking off World War I. Because remember those alliances I was telling you about earlier?
Yeah.
The alliance system pulled a bunch of countries into the conflict almost immediately.
Can you explain that to me?
Sure. So, for example, Germany was allied with Austro-Hungary, and they supported its declaration of war against Serbia. And so then they declared war on Serbia, which was allied with Russia and France.
Why, Mama?
Well, Russia supported Serbia, and then they mobilized against the Austro-Hungarian Empire along with Germany. And then France and Great Britain entered the war to support their alliances with Russia and Belgium.
My mind is blown.
Yeah, it was a really complicated spider web of alliances. So all it took was the empire's decision to declare war on Serbia, and right away, 7 countries were involved. And then because of these alliances, what would have maybe been a localized fight just between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Serbia blew up into a full-scale war across Europe and became World War I. Ultimately, over 30 nations got involved in World War I, including the United States. The United States joined the war in 1917.
That's a big deal.
You're right. The assassination was a spark that lit up the powder keg that was ready to blow in Europe. And before we wrap up, there are a few things you should know about World War I and all the things that came out of this assassination.
Fact number 1.
I mentioned earlier that a defining feature of World War I, especially on the Western Front, was something called trench warfare. And what this is where soldiers lived in dug-out trenches for extended periods. So they were out in the open, facing harsh conditions and constant danger. And there was a lot of open space, and each army would be in these trenches shooting at each other from across long distances.
Fact number 2.
World War I saw the first large-scale use of chemical weapons, including something called mustard gas, which caused really tough injuries and a lot of suffering for the soldiers who were exposed to it.
Fact number 3.
World War I became a testing ground for new technology. A lot of technology that we have today came out of technology that was tested in World War I. This include tanks, airplanes, and machine guns, which significantly changed the way wars were fought compared to other historic wars. Fact number 4. World War I resulted in the collapse of 4 major empires. You've already heard about the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but the Russian Empire, the German Empire, and the Ottoman empires all collapsed following World War I.
Whoa, no way.
Now that you have a little bit more information and you've learned about this past moment in history, we'll let you go. But before we let you go, here's a little poem we made for you to help you remember some key details about this past moment from history.
We wrote you a poem.
On June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo town, Archduke Franz Ferdinand's life was brought down. A young man named Princip took aim with might and shot him and Sophie on that fateful night. Their death sparked a war so vast and wide, starting World War I with millions to die. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was a tragic event that sparked a chain reaction across Europe. His death brought together a tangled web of alliances, tensions, and conflicts that led to the outbreak of World War I. And this war, the Great War, changed the world forever. Understanding this past moment in history helps us see how a single act of violence can have huge consequences, and it reminds us of the importance of peace and diplomacy. Thank you for listening to another episode of Check This Out. Remember, here at Check This Out, we use verified sources when creating episodes for you.
Our sources are
History.com, the Imperial War Museums, Encyclopedia Britannica, Biography.com, and Norwich University.
Thanks for listening. See you next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.